The sun gleamed off the towering glass structure of the Pinnacle Hotel, its sleek, modern design standing proudly amidst the historic buildings of the city. Ava Daniels, a black woman in her late 30s, stepped out of a luxury sedan, her sharp-tailored suit reflecting the precision of her business acumen. She exuded a quiet confidence that was impossible to ignore, something that came with years of relentless hard work, countless struggles, and triumphs. Ava was not just any businesswoman. She was a self-made billionaire, the CEO of a sprawling real estate empire that now spanned multiple continents. Today was supposed to be a moment of personal victory. After years of navigating the cutthroat world of business, she had finally decided to treat herself to a stay at one of the most exclusive hotels in the city, the Pinnacle. It was renowned for its luxury, attracting the wealthy elite, the politicians, the celebrities. Ava had earned her place among them, and this hotel was supposed to be a small celebration of all she had achieved. As she stepped out of the car, however, a familiar weight settled on her chest. The nagging sense that no matter how much she had accomplished, there were still places in this world that would never truly accept her. No matter how much wealth she amassed, she would always be measured by the color of her skin before her accomplishments. "Everything's good, Ava?" asked Elliot Reed, her sharp-eyed assistant and confidant, as he followed her out of the car, carrying their bags. "Yes, everything should be fine," Ava replied, though she could already feel the unease bubbling within her. "Just keep an eye out. I have a feeling something's off today." Elliot, who had been by her side since the early days of her real estate empire when they could barely afford office space, smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I triple-checked everything. We're their VIP guests this week, remember?" Despite Elliot's words, Ava's mind raced. Over the years, she'd faced resistance, discrimination, and outright rejection in some of the world's most prestigious spaces. The discomfort was always the same: the subtle hesitation, the condescending glances, the veiled questions. She had learned how to keep her composure in such situations, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt every time. As they walked into the grand lobby of the Pinnacle, the luxury was undeniable: gleaming marble floors, high ceilings, and massive chandeliers casting their soft glow over the room. Classical music played faintly in the background, a soundtrack to the ostentatious elegance surrounding her. But as she passed by groups of guests, she couldn't ignore the way eyes followed her every step. "Good afternoon," the receptionist said, her voice polite but lacking warmth. Her gaze flicked nervously between Ava and Elliot. "How may I assist you today?" "We have a reservation under Ava Daniels," Elliot replied confidently, stepping up to the counter. The receptionist froze. Her fingers paused on the keyboard, and for a long moment, there was a hint of discomfort in her eyes as she glanced back up at Ava. She typed again, but the look on her face was already telling. "I'm sorry, I don't see any reservation under that name." Ava felt her stomach sink, but she kept her composure. She had dealt with situations like this before. The mix-up, the sudden overbooking, the inexplicable glitches. This was more than a mistake. It was something she had experienced countless times in her life. Subtle discrimination, the kind that wasn't always overt but always felt. "I confirmed the reservation myself," Elliot said, his voice growing firmer. "Please check again. It was booked weeks ago." The receptionist hesitated before picking up the phone and dialing, her voice dropping into a whisper as she called for a manager. Ava knew exactly what was happening. She had seen it all before: the polite refusals, the obvious discomfort, the sudden technical issues. A few minutes later, the manager, Simon Kane, a silver-haired man dressed in an impeccable suit, approached with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ava had met him before, and she could already sense what was coming. "Good afternoon. I'm Simon Kane, the hotel manager," he said with a practiced cordiality, though there was an unmistakable stiffness in his posture. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding regarding your reservation." Ava's heart sank further, but she kept her voice calm. "I don't think it's a misunderstanding," she replied smoothly. "I've been confirmed for the week." Simon cleared his throat, his smile faltering. "Unfortunately, we are fully booked. We don't have any available rooms at the moment." Elliot blinked in disbelief. "That's impossible. We've been assured that everything was in order." Ava raised her hand gently, silencing her assistant. She had been here before, many times before. A well-dressed receptionist, a polite manager. But behind those smiles was a system that still didn't know what to do with someone like her. Someone who had fought, clawed, and bled her way to the top, only to be reminded time and time again that some doors remained closed for people like her. It's all right. It's all right, Simon, Ava said, her voice steady but ice cold. I'll make other arrangements. Simon's eyes widened, as if surprised by her calm reaction. He had expected resistance, an argument, a scene, but Ava didn't need to make a spectacle of it. She knew the game. She had learned to play it better than most. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out of the hotel, her head held high. As Elliot scrambled to follow her, his face flushed with anger, he whispered urgently, Ava, this is ridiculous. We can't just let them get away with this. We should call the press or hire a lawyer. Ava stopped for a moment, taking a slow, deep breath. She turned back to face him, her expression calm but weary. I've fought this battle my whole life, Elliot. Do you really think this is the first time I've been denied something because of the color of my skin? She said softly. Elliot's face softened with a mix of sadness and frustration. But you shouldn't have to keep fighting, Ava. You've earned everything you have. They can't do this to you. Ava sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had fought this battle for as long as she could remember. Every step forward had come with its own struggles, but this time, she wouldn't react the way they wanted. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a public fight. She would show them the power of silence and the power of patience. I know, she said, and that's exactly why I won't fight them on their terms. They want a spectacle. They want me to react, but I won't give them that. Not today. Not anymore. Elliot fell silent, though his frustration was still palpable. So what now? Ava's eyes flickered with determination. We regroup, and I make them pay for this, but not in the way they expect. After leaving the hotel, Ava did not let the sting of rejection linger. Back in her private suite, she opened her laptop and began analyzing the financials of the Pinnacle Hotel. She quickly discovered a troubling truth. Despite its outward appearance of wealth and success, the hotel was struggling. The financials showed signs of poor management, with investor groups increasingly desperate to maintain the hotel's high status. Ava smiled to herself. This was her chance. The Pinnacle, a symbol of exclusivity and privilege, would soon become her next conquest. It wasn't just about the hotel. It was personal. It was about making a statement, about showing the world that she had not just earned a seat at the table, but that she could own the table itself. I'll buy them out, Ava muttered under her breath, her fingers already flying across the keyboard, researching the investors, their debt, and how she could strategically take control. The next steps were clear. She would leverage her resources and offer a price so generous they couldn't refuse. Once the deal was signed, she would reshape the Pinnacle, transform it into a symbol of inclusion where people of all backgrounds could feel welcome. But she would also be patient. The wheels were already in motion. Ava sat in her sleek office high above the city, the glass walls giving her an unobstructed view of the skyline. Her fingers danced over the keys, pulling up the financial records she had meticulously analyzed earlier. She was no stranger to the world of mergers and acquisitions, but this was personal. The Pinnacle Hotel, with its gleaming exterior and pretentious air of exclusivity, had long been a symbol of what Ava had always fought against. The subtle racism that pervaded places like this, the kind of places that accepted only a certain type of person, had always been a part of her struggle. She knew that to succeed in a world that still clung to outdated ideals of wealth and privilege, she would have to outsmart the system at its own game. Ava had already begun assembling her team, handpicking a few trusted advisors and financial experts who had helped her secure numerous high-stakes deals in the past. They would craft a plan to acquire the Pinnacle, but this time she would do it with a twist. As she scrolled through the financial reports, she felt a surge of satisfaction. The Pinnacle's investors were drowning in debt, and their recent attempts to sell the hotel had been unsuccessful. The global hotel market was shifting, and the old ways of doing business were starting to crumble. The once stalwart institution was now vulnerable, and Ava was poised to strike. By the time the night settled in, she was already drafting her proposal, an offer so generous that the investors couldn't possibly refuse. It was designed to be just enough to seem like a fair deal, but not too much to put her out of pocket. The last thing she wanted was to make them feel like they had won. She wanted them to think they were getting a great deal, only to realize that they were selling their soul. She leaned back in her chair, satisfaction settling over her. This would work. Days later, in a sleek, high-rise boardroom downtown, Ava and her team sat across from the beleaguered investors of the Pinnacle Hotel. The room was thick with tension. Ava's confidence radiated in the room, but the investors, old, conservative men and women whose fortunes had been built on outdated methods, were visibly uncomfortable. They were not used to this. Ava spoke first, her voice steady, every word deliberate. I know the Pinnacle Hotel has been an iconic part of this city's landscape for decades, but as you all know, times are changing. Luxury is evolving. What once worked for you is no longer enough to keep this place afloat. The market is changing, and so it's time to consider a new vision. Simon Kane, the same manager who had so arrogantly dismissed her earlier, shifted uneasily in his seat. Ava had done her homework. He was the largest shareholder in the hotel and had fought fiercely to maintain its outdated policies and culture. He had been the gatekeeper of its exclusivity. Ava couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she made the deal. She turned her gaze to him, a faint smile curling on her lips. Mr. Kane, I believe you know the situation better than anyone. The Pinnacle is in debt, and your investors are desperate. My offer is simple. I will buy your controlling stake in the hotel. I'll offer you a price higher than any other potential buyer could. The room fell silent as Simon took in her words, his face betraying none of his thoughts. He leaned forward, his fingers tented together. Ava, I'm not sure your numbers align with what we've seen. We have a history here, a legacy. Ava's expression hardened, her voice unwavering. A legacy? What legacy are you talking about, Mr. Kane? The legacy of exclusion? The legacy of people like me being turned away at the door? I'm not here to preserve your legacy. I'm here to create a new one, a legacy that includes everyone, regardless of their background. Her words hung in the air, sharp and pointed. She knew that what she was offering was more than just a financial transaction. It was a challenge to their entire way of thinking. Simon Kane's lips tightened, but after a long moment, he nodded. I'll need to take this offer to the board. Ava smiled, a cool glint in her eyes. Take your time, Mr. Kane, but remember, I'm offering you more than anyone else would, and I'm not here to waste time. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Ava was relentless. She followed up on every aspect of the deal, ensuring that every detail was perfect. Meanwhile, her legal team worked tirelessly to ensure that when the deal closed, it would be irreversible. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, she received the call. Miss Daniels, the voice on the other end of the line said, the board has accepted your offer. The Pinnacle is yours. Ava felt a surge of triumph, but it was tempered by something deeper, something more profound. This wasn't just about business. This was about rewriting the narrative of the hotel, about reshaping a space that had once turned people like her away. Her first order of business was clear. She would ensure that no one, no matter their background, would ever feel unwelcome in the Pinnacle again. Weeks passed, and Ava was hands-on in her transformation of the hotel. She fired several key staff members who had been responsible for upholding the discriminatory policies that had tainted the hotel's reputation. Among them was Robert Finch, the silver-haired manager who had so graciously denied her reservation. He was dismissed without ceremony, and as the new staff members were brought in, Ava made it clear that the Pinnacle would no longer be a place of exclusivity. It would be a place of inclusivity. She brought in a diverse team of leaders, ensuring that people from all backgrounds and walks of life had a seat at the table. She invited experts in diversity and inclusion to train the staff, emphasizing that luxury was no longer about exclusivity. It was about belonging. But the changes didn't stop there. Ava announced that the Pinnacle would host community outreach programs and career training initiatives for underrepresented groups. She ensured that every guest, from the elite to the everyman, would feel welcome. The hotel's transformation from an exclusive elitist bastion to a beacon of inclusivity became headline news. Despite the pushback from some of the hotel's longtime patrons who felt betrayed by the changes, Ava knew that she was doing the right thing. The first day of the new era arrived with a celebration. Ava stood at the grand ballroom surveying the crowd of new guests, people from all walks of life, people who would never have stepped foot inside the Pinnacle before. Now they were here, enjoying the luxury they had once been denied. Ava felt a deep satisfaction settle in her chest. The Pinnacle Hotel, once a symbol of exclusion, had become a testament to what could be achieved when barriers were broken and new possibilities embraced. As she spoke to the crowd, her voice echoed through the grand hall. This hotel is more than just a building. It's a reflection of the world we want to create. A world where every person has a chance, no matter their race, their background, or their financial status. We're not just offering luxury, we're offering opportunity. This is just the beginning. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in her life, Ava felt the weight of a lifetime of battles lift from her shoulders. She had not just claimed victory for herself. She had claimed it for everyone who had ever been turned away. Ava's success with the Pinnacle was just the beginning. She had bigger plans. The rebranding of the hotel was only one part of her larger vision. She wanted to create a movement, a network of hotels that operated with the same values she had instilled in the Pinnacle. The idea of taking her vision global, of changing the face of the luxury hotel industry forever, ignited a fire within her. With the success of the Pinnacle under her belt, Ava began scouting new properties, eager to expand her network and create a world where wealth, privilege, and luxury were no longer synonymous with exclusion. Her next venture, a luxury resort in the Caribbean, a place that had once been known for its members-only policies. Ava was determined to turn it into a destination that was open to all, a place where people of every background could experience the finest things in life without fear of discrimination. As Ava stood on the beach, looking out at the horizon, she knew this was only the beginning. The world was ready for change, and she was going to lead the charge. Together, she said, her voice barely a whisper as the wind carried her words, "We'll change everything." After the first successful transformation of the Pinnacle Hotel, Ava found herself grappling with the challenges of scaling up her mission. The feedback from both guests and staff was overwhelmingly positive, but there were whispers from the old guard, those who had once been in control of the Pinnacle. They were watching her, waiting for her to falter. Ava knew the stakes. She was not just in the business of hotels, she was in the business of changing how the world viewed luxury, class, and race. Her fight was about more than financial gains. It was about cultural transformation. And that was a far harder battle to win. Despite the success at the Pinnacle, there were constant reminders of how entrenched the old world was in the industry. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive, but there were still murmurs of resistance from high-ranking figures in the hospitality world. Ava's journey was becoming a lightning rod for both praise and vitriol. Her next step was the expansion to the Caribbean resort, a sprawling coastal property that once catered exclusively to wealthy white patrons. This location would be the next proving ground for her philosophy. But Ava was ready. The luxury resort sat perched on a cliffside overlooking the Caribbean Sea, its once stunning architecture now weathered and outdated. The exclusive club had been known for its draconian entry policies, its membership restricted to only the wealthiest and most properly connected families. Ava had done extensive research on the property's history. She knew that the previous owners had manipulated local governments and used their wealth to maintain the resort's elitist status. As she stepped into the resort's lobby, she could feel the weight of its old history pressing against her. The marble floors were cold under her feet, and the crystal chandeliers above seemed to glare down at her as if mocking her presence. The staff, a mix of locals and expatriates, looked at her with a blend of curiosity and skepticism. To them, she wasn't just a businesswoman, she was an interloper. The resort's transformation wouldn't be easy. Ava knew that, but she was determined to press forward. Over the following weeks, she held meetings with the local community, government officials, and activists to understand the complex socio-political landscape. She offered scholarships to local students who wanted to work in hospitality, trained a diverse new workforce, and opened the resort's doors to the underprivileged in the region. Ava's commitment to inclusion was unwavering, and she used the resort as a platform to break down barriers that had existed for generations. But as the months passed, she faced resistance, not from the local community, but from the upper echelons of the resort's original elite clientele. One afternoon, while walking through the resort's lush gardens, Ava received a call that would change everything. "Miss Daniels," the voice on the other end was urgent. "We've encountered a serious issue at the resort. There's been a series of online reviews posted, all claiming poor service and subpar conditions." Ava froze mid-step, the warm Caribbean breeze suddenly feeling oppressive. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a coordinated attack, a smear campaign aimed at discrediting the resort's transformation. She immediately called an emergency meeting with her team. "This is sabotage," she said, her voice sharp. "We've had a target on our backs from the moment we took over. It's time to fight back." Ava knew who was behind it: the former owners of the resort. They had connections, wealth, and power, and they were willing to go to any lengths to preserve their legacy. The sabotage was just the beginning. They would use every tool at their disposal to destroy Ava's reputation and the progress she was making. Her legal team swung into action, tracking down the origin of the fake reviews and identifying the individuals behind the campaign. Ava wasn't about to let her vision be derailed by these cowardly tactics. She began working with local media outlets to expose the truth. But the battle didn't stop there. As Ava's efforts to clean up the resort's reputation gained traction, she started to receive veiled threats, anonymous messages warning her to leave the resort alone or else. She wasn't afraid. The pressure was mounting, and as the sabotage escalated, so did Ava's personal struggles. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay focused on the bigger picture, but the stress was starting to take its toll. She hadn't seen her family in months. Her mother had been calling constantly, worried about Ava's well-being. "You've become so consumed by this," her mother's voice echoed in her mind, the words a reminder of the sacrifices Ava had made. "It's not worth it if it costs you everything." But Ava knew there was no turning back. She had made a promise to herself, to everyone who had been marginalized, that she would never stop fighting. Still, the loneliness weighed on her. Ava was becoming a legend, but it came at the cost of her personal life. The days blended together as she dealt with the complexities of managing both the Pinnacle and the Caribbean resort. The higher she climbed, the more isolation she felt. She began to question whether the toll on her personal life was worth it. Was the world ready for her vision? Was it worth fighting so hard when every victory seemed to come at such a steep cost? One night, after a particularly grueling meeting with local officials who had resisted her plans for inclusive hiring practices, Ava stood alone on the balcony of her office at the resort, overlooking the vast expanse of the Caribbean Sea. The moonlight cast a silver sheen over the water, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. It was a message from Devon, her trusted ally and the head of operations for her empire. "The investors at the Pinnacle are moving forward with their lawsuit. They're trying to claim breach of contract. We need to prepare for a legal battle." Ava's chest tightened. The battle was never over, was it? But this time, something inside her clicked. She had spent years being the underdog, fighting for every inch of ground she gained. Now, she was a force to be reckoned with. The investors who had once tried to shut her out would have to face the full weight of her resolve. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been turned away, overlooked, or oppressed by the very systems that had propped up people like Simon Kane and the old elite of the resort. "I'm ready," Ava whispered to herself, her voice low but filled with conviction. "It's time to finish what we started." The legal battle over the Pinnacle Hotel was shaping up to be a colossal showdown, one that would set the tone for the rest of Ava's empire. The investors, backed by the old guard of the hospitality industry, were determined to take her down. But Ava was prepared. She had already anticipated every move they would make, and she had surrounded herself with a team that was loyal to her cause. Her lawyers were ruthless, and her public relations team worked tirelessly to ensure that her side of the story was told. The media, once critical of her changes, was now starting to champion her cause, seeing her as the future of the industry. The courtroom was packed with high-profile figures, some who had supported her, others who had tried to undermine her. Simon Kane stood at the front, his face a mask of disdain. Ava entered the courtroom, calm but resolute. She wasn't just fighting for the pinnacle anymore. She was fighting for the future she believed in. The future where anyone, no matter their skin color, gender, or background, could step into luxury without fear of exclusion. As the trial unfolded, it became clear that Ava was not only the underdog, but the victor. The jury sided with her, the media hailed her as a revolutionary leader, and the investors were left scrambling, their plans in ruins. Ava had won, again, but this time it was different. This time her victory was a signal to the world. Change was here, and it wasn't going anywhere. The court decision had been a major victory for Ava, but as with all victories, it came at a cost. The investors at the Pinnacle were not going down quietly, and though they had lost the lawsuit, their bitterness was far from over. Ava was sitting in her office at the Pinnacle, reviewing expansion plans for her upcoming projects, when her assistant, Naomi, knocked and entered. She looked unsettled, her usually calm demeanor replaced with concern. "Ava, you need to see this," Naomi said, handing her a tablet. Ava glanced at the screen, her eyes narrowing. It was a news article with the headline, "Ava Daniels, the billionaire who stole a legacy and turned it into a farce." The article was a scathing attack, written by a journalist with close ties to the old elite. It claimed that Ava's transformation of the Pinnacle was nothing more than a publicity stunt, accusing her of desecrating the hotel's legacy. Ava clenched her jaw, the familiar wave of anger rising in her chest. She had known the backlash was inevitable, but seeing it so openly published made her blood boil. "They'll stop at nothing, will they?" Naomi said, her voice tight. "They're trying to break your reputation again." Ava looked up at her, her mind already working. "This time, we're going to fight back, but we're going to do it on our terms." Ava knew that playing by the rules of the media and the old elite wouldn't work this time. She needed a different strategy, one that would not only defend her actions but also solidify her place as a true force in the industry. She called a meeting with her core team, including her PR strategist, Alan, and her legal team. "Let's take this to the next level," Ava said, her voice steady but charged with determination. "I'm not going to let them rewrite the narrative. We're going to create a new narrative, one where the truth is undeniable." Alan, her PR strategist, leaned forward. "You want to go public with your story, your real story, the one about the fight to transform the industry, the discrimination, and the legacy you inherited. Show the world what it means to own the past and shape the future." Ava nodded. "Exactly. It's time to put everything out there, the struggles, the triumphs, and the people who stood by me. We'll highlight the positive changes we've made at the Pinnacle and the Caribbean Resort. We'll turn this attack into a celebration of progress." Alan grinned. "I love it. Let's make this viral." Over the next few weeks, Ava's team orchestrated an elaborate media campaign. They arranged interviews with key figures in the community, employees who had benefited from the new inclusive policies, local leaders who supported her vision, and even guests who had once been turned away from the hotel but were now welcomed with open arms. But the centerpiece of the campaign was Ava herself. She sat down with a top journalist in the industry and told her story, one that was raw, vulnerable, and unapologetically honest. She spoke about her upbringing, her fight against racism, and her determination to change an industry that had excluded people like her for too long. "I didn't come into this to destroy something. I came into this to build something better," Ava said in the interview. The Pinnacle was never meant to be a symbol of exclusion. It was always meant to be a place of opportunity, a place where anyone, no matter their race, background, or status, could feel welcomed and respected. That's the vision I'm creating, one that's about redefining luxury, not maintaining outdated ideals. The interview went viral, and within days, Ava was everywhere. The media that had once criticized her now hailed her as a revolutionary, a visionary who was changing the very fabric of the hospitality industry. The backlash from the old guard was swift and brutal, but Ava's supporters were louder. The tide was turning in her favor. Despite the public victory, Ava knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The investors and powerful figures in the industry who had opposed her were not going to give up that easily. They had money, connections, and influence. Ava had to be careful not to underestimate them. A few weeks after the media blitz, Ava was sitting in her office reviewing some potential new locations for her expanding hotel network when her phone rang. It was a call she'd been dreading. "Ava, we've got a situation," Naomi said, her voice urgent. "There's been an incident at the Caribbean resort. A group of former elite members has organized a protest outside the resort. They're trying to turn the public against you, claiming the resort has become a sanctuary for the undeserving." Ava's heart sank. She had expected resistance, but this was different. This wasn't just about her business, it was personal. These people wanted to destroy everything she had built. They were sending a message. They would fight her at every turn. "Get our security team down there immediately," Ava said, her voice cold. "We'll handle this." Ava arrived at the Caribbean resort in the late afternoon. The protest was already in full swing, with a handful of well-dressed protesters holding signs and shouting slogans. The resort's entrance was blocked, and the media had already arrived, capturing every moment. Ava walked past the protesters, her expression calm and composed. She was determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her angry. The protesters, however, did not hold back. They shouted insults, trying to provoke her, calling her an outsider and a destroyer of tradition. Ava stepped up to the microphone in front of the gathered media and spoke directly to the crowd. "I understand that change is hard. I understand that you might not agree with what I'm doing," she began, her voice unwavering. "But what I am doing is not just about me. It's about creating a future where everyone has a place at the table, where we don't measure someone's worth by their skin color or background." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This resort has always been about exclusion, about keeping people out who didn't fit a certain mold. But I'm changing that. I'm turning this place into something more than a luxury destination. I'm turning it into a space where opportunity and inclusivity are the true luxuries." The protesters grew silent, some of them uneasy with her words. Ava continued, "If you're against inclusivity, if you're against creating opportunities for people who have been denied them for generations, then maybe this isn't the place for you. But if you believe in equality, if you believe that everyone should have a chance to experience the best that life has to offer, then I welcome you. You can stand with us, or you can stand against us. But know this, I won't be backing down." The crowd stood in stunned silence for a moment before the protesters dispersed, some muttering under their breath. The media, however, was captivated. Ava had just turned a hostile protest into a moment of triumph. The protest had been a turning point for Ava. The media storm that followed was unlike any she had faced before. But instead of crumbling under the pressure, Ava had embraced it, using her platform to push forward her vision of an inclusive, diverse luxury industry. Back at her office, as she watched the news coverage of the protest, Ava felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had been tested again, and once again, she had emerged victorious. But she knew this was only the beginning. Her empire was growing. Her plans to create a network of hotels that were built on inclusivity, diversity, and equality were coming to life. And she was ready to take the fight to the next level. "We're not just building hotels," she said to Naomi, as they sat together in the office late one evening. "We're building a movement." Ava Daniels sat in her office at the Pinnacle Hotel, now transformed beyond recognition. The marble floors were polished to a gleam, the air was filled with the soft hum of guests enjoying their stay, and the staff exuded a welcoming atmosphere that she had worked so tirelessly to create. The light outside was beginning to fade as evening settled over the city, and yet something felt off. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the view outside the large windows of her corner office. Below, the lights of the city flickered like stars, illuminating the streets she had once walked in desperation. She had come so far, from being the little girl who couldn't even afford a meal, to now owning a luxury hotel and resort network that redefined the standards of hospitality. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, she felt uncertain. The weight of everything she had fought for, everything she had lost and gained, hung heavily in her heart. The hotel had flourished, the media was praising her as a trailblazer, and the changes she had instituted were undeniable. But deep down, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that there was one final battle left to fight. Her mind kept returning to the day she had been rejected at this very hotel, humiliated by the discrimination, the cold treatment she had received because of her skin. She had turned that rejection into her driving force, but now a question lingered in her mind. Had she truly won? Ava closed her eyes, leaning forward, her fingers tapping the desk as she weighed the thoughts in her head. Her legal victory over the investors had been a public triumph. Her transformation of the Pinnacle into a beacon of inclusivity and opportunity was a real achievement. But something gnawed at her. She had rewritten history, but did that really mean she had erased the past? Was she truly beyond the hurt, beyond the pain of what had happened here? There was still one thing she had yet to do. Ava sat up straighter, the determination in her eyes returning. The last challenge she had yet to face wasn't from the media or her business rivals. It was a personal one. She had turned the Pinnacle into a symbol of inclusion, but she had never truly confronted the very people who had discriminated against her, the ones who had humiliated her. She knew what she had to do. The idea came to her in a flash. She would return to the Pinnacle, just as she had been that fateful day. But this time she wouldn't be Ava Daniels, the billionaire owner. She would be someone else entirely, someone who could slip past the barriers of their prejudice and experience firsthand how far the hotel had really come. She contacted Naomi and asked her to make arrangements for a reservation. "I need to book a room at the Pinnacle," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "and I need it to be under a new name. The reservation should be in the name of Eva Monroe." Naomi paused on the other end of the line. "Eva Monroe? Are you sure about this, Ava?" "I need to do this," Ava replied, her voice firm. "For myself." The next morning, Ava stood in front of her full-length mirror, inspecting the new persona she had created. She had dyed her hair a shade of deep auburn and styled it in waves that fell just below her shoulders. Her makeup was subtle but elegant, emphasizing her features without drawing too much attention. She wore a tailored black dress that was chic and sophisticated, but it was a far cry from the sharp business suits she typically donned as Ava Daniels. As she gazed at the reflection of Eva Monroe, a woman who seemed almost unfamiliar, Ava felt a pang of vulnerability. This was the first time in years she had felt like an outsider, not because of the world around her, but because of the person she had chosen to become. Would the people who had once turned her away see her for who she truly was? Would they recognize the strength she had worked so hard to build? Her heart beat a little faster as she left her apartment, stepping into the waiting car. This was more than just a test of the hotel's progress. It was a test of herself. Could she confront the ghosts of her past and prove to herself that the journey had been worth it? As the sleek black car pulled up to the entrance of the Pinnacle, Ava's stomach tightened. The hotel stood tall and imposing, its glass facade shimmering in the late afternoon sun. For a moment, she felt a rush of memories. The cold reception, the subtle rejection, the doubt in their eyes as they turned her away. The familiar pang of anger rose in her chest, but she quickly tamped it down. This time it was different. She entered the lobby, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The grandeur of the space was as opulent as ever, with towering columns, ornate chandeliers, and marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. But what struck her the most was the atmosphere, the welcoming warmth that now filled the air. The coldness she had felt so many months ago was gone, replaced by something more human. A receptionist, a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, greeted her as she approached. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pinnacle. How may I assist you today?" the receptionist asked, her tone polite and professional. Ava smiled softly, her voice calm but measured. "I have a reservation under the name Eva Monroe." The receptionist's fingers flew over the keyboard, scanning the reservation system. A moment passed before she looked up, her smile widening. "Ah, yes, Miss Monroe. We have you all set up in our deluxe suite. Please follow me. As they walked to the elevator, Ava couldn't help but notice how different the atmosphere felt, how much more inclusive it seemed. There was no hesitation in the staff's manner, no subtle discomfort as they had shown her before. This was a hotel that now embraced every guest, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their wealth. It wasn't just the policies that had changed, it was the very culture of the place. When Ava entered her suite, she stood for a moment, taking in the elegant surroundings. The room was everything she had envisioned, a perfect balance of luxury and comfort. It felt right. Sitting down on the plush armchair by the window, she let out a deep breath. She had done it. She had returned to this place, not as the billionaire owner, but as the person who had once been turned away, humiliated, and rejected. And now, as Eva Monroe, she had been welcomed with open arms. But it wasn't just the welcome that moved her. It was the recognition of how far she had come, not just in terms of her success, but in terms of the impact she had made. A knock at the door broke her reverie. She opened it to find the same receptionist standing there, holding a small envelope. Miss Monroe, we wanted to personally welcome you and thank you for choosing to stay with us. We hope your stay is as comfortable as possible, she said, handing the envelope to Ava. Inside the envelope was a letter. It was brief, but it carried weight. It was from the hotel's management, but the signature at the bottom made Ava's heart skip a beat. Dear Miss Monroe, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude for the trust you've shown in us by choosing to stay at the Pinnacle. We are committed to providing an inclusive, respectful environment for all guests, regardless of background. As a token of appreciation, we are pleased to offer you complimentary access to all of our facilities for the duration of your stay. Additionally, we are proud to announce that your stay here marks a significant moment in our ongoing transformation. Thank you for being part of this journey. Warm regards, Robert Finch, General Manager, Pinnacle Hotel. Ava stared at the letter in disbelief. Robert Finch, the same man who had coldly rejected her, was now acknowledging her efforts. He had been a part of the old regime, the one that had perpetuated exclusion. And now, as part of the new Pinnacle, he was personally thanking her for the changes she had made. A wave of emotion washed over Ava. She had done it. She had turned rejection into victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been denied a place in the world of luxury. She stepped to the window, looking out over the city. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. The battle had been long, the struggle intense, but in the end, she had triumphed. She had changed not just the hotel, but an entire industry, and had found a deeper connection with herself along the way. And as she stood there, she realized that the Pinnacle wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for: opportunity, inclusivity, and equality. Ava Daniels smiled to herself, the weight of her journey finally lifting. She had come full circle. The past had been painful, but the future was hers. She had truly won.